Major Sarah Chen had learned to recognize the look. It always came in the first 30 seconds of a briefing, right after she introduced herself as the lead intelligence officer for the operation. The slight pause, the exchanged glances, the way older officers would shift in their chairs, already preparing their questions before she'd presented a single slide. It was there now, in the packed conference room at Forward Operating Base Sharana, as she stood before 24 officers representing 3 different special operations task forces. Outside, the Afghan summer burned white-hot against the compound walls. Inside, the air conditioning fought a losing battle against body heat and tension. She was 32 years old, 5'5" in her boots, and she had more operational intelligence experience in Central Asia than anyone else in the room. None of that mattered to the Marine Lieutenant Colonel in the second row, whose name tape read Hargrove and whose expression read skepticism. Major Chen is our primary human coordinator for the region, Colonel Price was saying from beside her, his introduction carrying the weariness of a man who'd made this speech before. She's been tracking the network for 18 months. She knows the terrain, the players, and the patterns better than anyone. Sarah clicked to the first slide, a satellite image of a compound in the Coast Province, 40 kilometers from the Pakistani border, 3 buildings arranged in a U-shape around a central courtyard, high walls, single access point. Target Osprey, she began, her voice steady and clear. We have credible intelligence that Tariq Wasim, the regional facilitator for the Haqqani network, will be at this location tomorrow night. He's been coordinating weapons transfers and IED components for the past 6 months. This is the first time we've had actionable intelligence on his location. Hargrove's hand went up before she reached the second slide. What's the sourcing on this intelligence? Sarah had expected this. She always expected it. Multiple human sources, cross-referenced with SIGINT intercepts and pattern-of-life analysis spanning 4 months. How reliable are your sources? Track record of 83% accuracy over the past year. All previous intelligence has been verified post-operation. 83% means 17% wrong. Hargrove leaned forward. What's the confidence level on this specific intel? High. She didn't elaborate. The data was in the brief. He could read it himself. High isn't a number, Major. Colonel Price shifted beside her, but Sarah raised a hand slightly. She'd fought this fight before. The confidence level is 92% based on source reliability, signal correlation, and movement pattern analysis. But you're right, that no intelligence is ever certain. That's why the brief includes contingency protocols for dry holes, wrong location scenarios, and compromise indicators. She clicked to the next slide before he could respond. Detailed floor plans of the compound, derived from previous reconnaissance and informant descriptions. Entry points marked in red. Potential civilian locations marked in yellow. The assault plan calls for a 3-team approach. Alpha Team establishes outer cordon. Bravo Team... Wait, this time it was a Navy commander from SEAL Team 6, arms crossed, expression neutral. Who developed this assault plan? I did, Sarah said, in coordination with your operational leads. You coordinated with Lieutenant Simmons? I briefed him yesterday. He had concerns about the southern approach, which I incorporated into the revised plan. So you changed the plan. I refined it based on operational input. That's the purpose of coordination. The commander nodded slowly, but his arms stayed crossed. In the back row, a Green Beret captain was whispering to his team sergeant. Sarah couldn't hear the words, but she could read the body language. She'd been reading it for years. She continued through the brief, timeline, asset positioning, communication protocols, rules of engagement, medical evacuation routes. Every detail built from months of patient intelligence work, countless hours of analysis, hundreds of small pieces assembled into a coherent operational picture. 20 minutes into the presentation, her satellite phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. 30 seconds later, it buzzed again, then again. Colonel Price glanced at her. Protocol said you didn't answer phones during classified briefings, but 3 calls in a row meant something urgent. She excused herself, stepping to the back of the room, turning her back to the assembled officers. Chen, Major Chen, this is General Hawthorne's aide at CENTCOM. Please hold for the general. Sarah felt the room's attention shift entirely to her back. No one moved, no one spoke. A 2-star general didn't call into a forward operating base to chat. Major Chen? General Hawthorne's voice was crisp, focused, carrying the authority of a man who'd spent 30 years making decisions that meant life or death. I need your assessment on Target Osprey. We're getting conflicting information from theater intelligence, and I need someone who knows the ground truth. Sarah's mind raced. Theater intelligence meant someone above her pay grade had a different interpretation of the same data. Someone who probably wasn't in Afghanistan, as someone who definitely wasn't at this briefing. Sir, my assessment stands as presented. Tariq Wasim will be at the compound tomorrow night. High confidence based on sourced intelligence, pattern analysis, and correlated SIGINT. The window is narrow, approximately 3 hours, but it's solid. Theater is saying the intelligence is thin. They're recommending we hold for better confirmation. Sarah closed her eyes briefly. This was the dance. Someone in an operations center 6,000 miles away, looking at the same report she'd compiled, deciding. They knew better. Deciding she'd missed something, or deciding they didn't trust her analysis. Sir, with respect, Theater doesn't have visibility on the source network. They don't have the pattern of life data. They don't know that Wasim only moves on Thursdays and only to locations he's verified personally in the previous 48 hours. Our assets confirmed his advanced team surveyed the compound on Tuesday. He's coming tomorrow. Silence on the line. Then, if you're wrong, Major, we've blown operational security and exposed our sources for nothing. If we wait, sir, we lose him. He doesn't surface often. Next opportunity could be months out, if at all. More silence. Sarah could feel every pair of eyes in the room on her. She kept her back turned, her voice low, but in the stillness of the conference room, every word carried. Your recommendation? Execute as planned, sir. Tomorrow night, I'll stake my career on it. She heard something that might have been a laugh. You already have, Major. All right. Tell Colonel Price the operation is approved at CENTCOM level. We'll send confirmation through channels in the next hour. Yes, sir. The line went dead. Sarah turned back to face the room. Every officer was watching her now. The dynamics shifted in the space of a 3-minute phone call. Hargrove's arms were no longer crossed. The SEAL commander was leaning forward. Colonel Price was trying not to smile. CENTCOM approves the operation, she said simply. We execute tomorrow night at 2200 hours. Are there any other questions about the intelligence package? No one spoke. Good. Let's talk logistics. The briefing ran another 40 minutes, but something fundamental had changed. Questions came faster, but they were different now. Practical, focused, absent the underlying challenge. When she explained the exfil route, no one questioned her reasoning. When she outlined the signals protocol, officers took notes instead of raising objections. Afterward, as the room cleared, Hargrove approached her. Up close, she could see the crow's feet around his eyes, the sun damage on his neck, the way his uniform had been worn soft by too many deployments. He looked tired in the way only long wars make men tired. That was General Hawthorne, wasn't it? Yes, sir. He doesn't call majors to get their assessment. He did today. Hargrove studied her for a long moment. How long have you been doing this? Intelligence work? 8 years. This theater? 18 months. And you really think Wasim is going to be there tomorrow? It wasn't a question, but Sarah answered anyway. I know he will be. The Marine Lieutenant Colonel nodded slowly. Then I hope you're right, Major, because a lot of people are about to bet their lives on your analysis. He walked out, leaving Sarah alone with Colonel Price and the lingering smell of too many bodies in too small a space. Price waited until the door closed before speaking. That was well played. I didn't play anything, sir. I gave my assessment. You always give your assessment, but Hawthorne calling during the brief, that's the kind of timing that changes minds. Sarah began packing up her laptop and classified materials. Theater intelligence said it was thin. They wanted to wait. Theater intelligence is staffed by analysts who've never left the wire. They look at reports and see data. You look at reports and see people. Price paused. That's why Hawthorne called you. That's why I wanted you running intel for this operation. Lieutenant Colonel Hargrove didn't want me running anything. Hargrove has 22 years in. He's watched a lot of operations go sideways based on bad intelligence. He's careful. That's not the same as wrong. Sarah zipped up her bag, the weight of classified hard drives and secure phones familiar against her shoulder. He thought I was too junior, too inexperienced, wrong body type for this job. Price didn't deny it. Maybe, but he listened to you defend your analysis. He saw you stand by your assessment when a 2-star asked if you were sure. That's what he needed to see. I shouldn't have to prove myself every single briefing. No, Price agreed. You shouldn't. But until you pin on silver oak leaves and have 20 years of operations behind you, you're going to have to keep proving it. That's not fair. It's not right. But it's real. Sarah hefted her bag and moved toward the door. At the threshold, she turned back. Sir, if I'm wrong tomorrow, you're not wrong. But if I am, if you are, then you made the best call you could with the information you had. That's all any of us can do. Price crossed his arms. But you're not wrong. I've seen your work. You're the best intelligence officer I've ever had on my team, and I've been doing this since before you were born. So get some sleep, check your gear, and be ready to run the operation tomorrow night. Because when that assault team hits that compound, they're going to need you on comms, and they're going to need you to be absolutely certain of what you told them. That night, Sarah lay in her bunk in the female officer quarters, a retrofitted shipping container with 4 racks and a failing air conditioning unit, and went through the intelligence package one more time. Every source report, every intercept, every piece of pattern analysis that had led her to the conclusion that Tariq Wasim would be at that compound. She'd started tracking Wasim 14 months ago, after a complex IED attack on a convoy killed 3 soldiers and wounded 7 more. The bomb maker's signature was distinctive: high-grade military explosives, sophisticated pressure plate triggers, carefully placed to maximize casualties on armored vehicles. 3 more attacks followed the same pattern over the next 6 weeks, each one more lethal than the last. The breakthrough came from a source she'd cultivated over months of patient work, a shopkeeper in Coast City whose cousin worked as a driver for the Haqqani network. The cousin talked. Not much at first, just hints, suggestions, vague mentions of a man who coordinated weapons shipments from across the border. Sarah had spent weeks building the intelligence picture, one small piece at a time, until Tariq Wasim's name emerged from the noise. Then came the hard part: tracking a ghost. Wasim never used phones, never stayed in the same location twice, moved only at night, only in vehicles with trusted drivers, only to locations he'd personally verified. He was careful, disciplined, and very, very good at staying alive in a region where American drones and special operations teams hunted men like him. But careful men still have patterns. They have to. You can't coordinate a regional weapons network without some degree of predictability, some routine that allows your subordinates to know when and where to meet you. Sarah had found the pattern in the gaps, the days when certain facilitators went quiet, the nights when vehicle movements spiked in specific areas, the rhythm of Thursday meetings that Wasim never missed. Tomorrow was Thursday. She checked her watch. 0:30 hours. In less than 20 hours, an assault team would hit that compound. If she was right, they'd capture or kill one of the most effective weapons facilitators in Regional Command East. If she was wrong, they'd find an empty building and compromised sources. Her phone buzzed. Text message from Colonel Price. Stop second-guessing yourself and get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Sarah smiled despite herself. Price had an uncanny ability to know exactly when his people were spiraling. She sent back a thumbs-up emoji and closed her laptop. But sleep didn't come easy. She lay in the dark, listening to the hum of generators outside and the breathing of 3 other female officers in their racks, and thought about all the ways tomorrow night could go wrong. Bad intelligence wasn't the only risk. There were mechanical failures, weather delays, enemy reinforcements, civilian casualties, a dozen variables that could turn a clean operation into a catastrophe. The difference was that those variables weren't her responsibility. The intelligence was. The certainty that sent men into danger was. Every operation she'd supported, every target package she'd built, carried that same weight. Lives hung on her analysis, on her ability to look at fragments of information and see truth instead of noise. She'd been right 83% of the time. Those were good odds in this business, better than most. But the 17% haunted her. The dry holes, the wrong locations, the times when the intelligence was almost right, but not quite, and men spent the night kicking down doors to find empty rooms. This time, though, she was certain as she'd ever been. Wasim would be there. She had to believe that. Because if she didn't, she had no business doing this job. 2,200 hours. The next night came with the particular silence that precedes violence. Sarah sat in the Joint Operations Center, surrounded by screens showing live feeds from drones overhead, radio networks crackling with controlled chatter, and a dozen other officers monitoring every aspect of the operation. Colonel Price stood behind her right shoulder, arms crossed, watching the same feeds. Across the room, Lieutenant Colonel Hargrove had positioned himself where he could see everything, his expression unreadable. Alpha Team in position, the radio crackled. Bravo Team set. Charlie Team ready on your call. Sarah studied the drone feed. The compound looked exactly as her sources had described it. 3 buildings, high walls, single gate. 2 vehicles in the courtyard, lights in the main building, movement visible through the windows. Thermal shows 8 individuals in the main structure, the drone operator reported. 3 in the eastern building, no signatures in the western building. 11 people. Wasim typically traveled with a 4-man security detail. Add 3 or 4 facilitators for the meeting, and you got a number close to 11. Major Chen, Price said quietly, call it. This was the moment, the last chance to abort, to call it off, to decide the intelligence wasn't solid enough. Sarah took a breath, studying every detail on the screen, comparing it against every piece of information she'd gathered. Target is active, she said, her voice carrying across the operations center. Execute. All teams, this is Alpha 6. Execute, execute, execute. The next 17 minutes happened in controlled chaos. Breaching charges blowing gates, teams flowing through compound. Radio calls marking rooms cleared, individuals detained, resistance minimal. Sarah tracked every movement, every report, comparing it against the expected pattern. Main structure secure, 8 EKIA detained. Eastern building secure, 3 local nationals detained, non-combatant. Western building clear, then silence. The kind of silence that meant something wasn't right. Alpha 6, this is Bravo 2, we've got a problem. Sarah's stomach dropped. Go ahead, Bravo 2. None of the detainees match the photograph of Target Osprey. Say again, Target is not present. The operations center went absolutely still. Sarah stared at the screen, her mind racing through possibilities. Wrong compound, wrong night, bad intelligence. Wasim had been tipped off. Bravo 2, this is Major Chen. She kept her voice level, professional, pushing down the rising panic. Check the detainees again. Wasim is known to travel with minimal security. He may be disguised as a lower-level facilitator. Roger, checking now. 30 seconds, 45. Sarah was aware of Hargrove watching her, of Price's hand on her shoulder, of every person in the operations center waiting to see if she'd just burned an entire operation. Alpha 6, Bravo 2, we've got him. Son of a bitch was wearing local clothes, pretending to be a driver. Matches the photograph. Positive ID on Target Osprey. The relief that flooded through Sarah was physical, almost painful. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them to see Hargrove walking toward her. Good call, Major, he said simply. Then, louder, to the room, outstanding intelligence work. Let's get these teams home safe. The extraction took another 40 minutes. By midnight, all teams were back at the base, and Tariq Wasim was in a detention facility, being processed for transport to Bagram. The operation was clean. No friendly casualties, no civilian injuries, target secured. Perfect. Sarah was writing her after-action report when Colonel Price found her in the intelligence shop, still hunched over her laptop at 0200 hours. You should be celebrating. I should be documenting lessons learned. Chen. Price waited until she looked up. You did good work, exceptional work. You need to acknowledge that. I got lucky. If Wasim had decided to postpone the meeting, if he'd chosen a different night, if any one of a dozen variables had shifted, but they didn't. Because you know how to read people, you understand patterns, you're patient enough to build intelligence over months instead of looking for quick wins. Price pulled up a chair. Hawthorne called again, after the operation. He wanted me to pass along his personal congratulations. Also said he's recommending you for the Bronze Star. Sarah blinked. Sir, I didn't do anything that deserves... You built an intelligence network from scratch. You tracked a high-value target for over a year. You stood by your analysis when people questioned it, including me at certain points. And you were right. Price leaned forward. That's worth recognizing, not just because it was successful, but because it was the kind of patient, professional intelligence work that wins wars, the kind that doesn't make headlines, but saves lives. I'm just doing my job. No, you're doing your job exceptionally well. There's a difference. Price stood. Get some sleep. We'll debrief the operation in the morning, and I'm sure you'll have 50 different agencies wanting to talk to Wasim's associates. Tomorrow's going to be busy. He was almost to the door when Sarah spoke again. Sir, thank you for trusting me, for backing me up when people questioned the intelligence. Price turned back. I didn't back you up because you're on my team. I backed you up because you earned it. Every analysis you've provided, every brief you've given, every call you've made has been solid. People like Hargrove needed to see that for themselves, but I already knew. He smiled slightly. Besides, Hawthorne doesn't call just anyone to get their assessment. He called you because he knows who the experts are, regardless of rank or time in service. You're one of them now. Start believing it. 6 months later, Sarah stood in a different briefing room, this time at CENTCOM headquarters in Tampa. She was presenting to a group of senior intelligence officers, sharing lessons learned from operations in Afghanistan. The room was full of lieutenant colonels and colonels, a few one-stars, and people who'd spent entire careers in the intelligence field. When she finished, the questions came, but they were different now. Detailed, professional, focused on methodology rather than credentials. One colonel asked about source development techniques. Another wanted to know about pattern analysis software. A Navy captain inquired about cross-referencing humans with SIGINT in denied areas. No one questioned whether she knew what she was talking about. After the brief, as people filed out, a familiar voice spoke from behind her. "Excellent presentation, Major." Sarah turned to find General Hawthorne, 2 stars gleaming on his shoulder, coffee cup in hand. She snapped to attention. "At ease," he said, waving her down. "I wanted to tell you personally that the intelligence you developed on the Haqqani network has been invaluable. We've used your methodology as a training model for other analysts. Thank you, sir. I also wanted to explain why I called you that day during your briefing." Hawthorne took a sip of coffee. "I'd received a message from Theater Intelligence recommending we postpone the operation. Said the sourcing was questionable, the confidence level too low. I could have just approved or denied based on what was in front of me. But I've learned that sometimes the people closest to the ground see things differently than the people reading reports in air-conditioned offices. You wanted the ground truth. I wanted to hear from the person who actually knew the target, who'd built the network, who understood the context. Rank doesn't always equal expertise, and time in service doesn't always equal insight." He set down his coffee cup. "You were right, and you had the courage to stake your career on it. That's the kind of intelligence officer we need in this fight." Sarah felt something shift inside her. Not validation exactly, but something closer to recognition. The understanding that she'd earned her place not through proving herself over and over, but through consistent patient excellence that spoke for itself. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." "Keep doing what you're doing, Major. The nation needs more officers like you, people who do the quiet, unglamorous work that saves lives. People who understand that intelligence isn't about being right every time. It's about being thorough, honest, and willing to own your assessments." He picked up his coffee and walked toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Major, your promotion to Lieutenant Colonel came through yesterday. Congratulations, you've earned it." A year after the Wasim operation, Sarah found herself back at Fort Huachuca, teaching a course on intelligence operations to newly minted lieutenants. She stood before a class of 25 young officers, most fresh from basic training, all eager and uncertain in the way new officers always were. "Intelligence work," she told them, "is about being right more than you're wrong. It's about building networks, developing sources, and having the patience to let a picture emerge over time. It's about standing by your analysis even when people question it, even when doubt creeps in, even when the stakes are life and death." A young lieutenant raised her hand. "Ma'am, what do you do when people don't believe your assessment?" Sarah smiled slightly, thinking of Hargrove, of the briefing room at Sharana, of the phone call that changed everything. "You do your job professionally, you present your evidence clearly, you defend your analysis honestly, and then you let the work speak for itself. What if they still don't believe you? Then you find someone who does, someone who values expertise over assumptions, someone who understands that the best intelligence comes from people who've done the work, regardless of what they look like or how long they've been doing it." Another hand. "How do you know when you're right?" Sarah considered the question. "You never know for certain. That's the hardest part of this job. Every piece of intelligence carries doubt. Every assessment requires judgment. Every operation based on your analysis puts lives at risk." She paused. "But you do the work anyway. You build your networks, you check your sources, you analyze the patterns, and when the moment comes, you make the call and you own it." The class continued for another hour, covering source development and analysis techniques in operational planning. But Sarah kept coming back to that central truth, that intelligence work was about more than data and reports. It was about judgment earned through experience, confidence built through consistent performance, and the courage to stand by your assessments when it mattered most. After class, the young lieutenant who'd asked about being believed approached her desk. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Have you ever had people question your authority?" Sarah looked at the lieutenant, 23, maybe 24, eager and nervous, and trying to figure out how to navigate a career in an institution that didn't always make space for people like her. She thought about Hargrove's crossed arms, about Theater Intelligence's skepticism, about every briefing where she'd had to prove herself before anyone would listen. "Yes," she said simply, "more times than I can count." "How did you handle it?" "I did my job better than anyone else could. I was more thorough, more careful, more prepared. I built relationships with people who valued competence over preconceptions, and I never ever let doubt make me hesitate when I knew I was right." The lieutenant nodded slowly. "Thank you, ma'am. That helps." As the young officer walked away, Sarah gathered her materials and headed for her office. Outside, the Arizona sun blazed against the training, grounds where new soldiers learned their trade. Inside, in quiet offices and briefing rooms, intelligence officers built the networks and analysis that would support them downrange. The work was invisible most of the time. No one wrote songs about patient source development or careful pattern analysis. No one made movies about the analyst who spent 18 months tracking a target before finally pinpointing his location. The valor wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, persistent, and absolutely essential. Sarah thought about Wasim, now in long-term detention, his weapons network disrupted, his facilitators rolled up. She thought about the IED attacks that hadn't happened, the convoys that made it through safely, the soldiers who came home because good intelligence let them strike first. That was the real legacy, not medals or recognition or phone calls from generals. The legacy was measured in lives saved and threats eliminated and missions accomplished. The legacy was built one patient day at a time, one source at a time, one assessment at a time. Years later, when someone would ask her about the Wasim operation, Sarah wouldn't talk about the briefing or Hargrove's skepticism or the phone call from General Hawthorne. She'd talk about the months of careful work, the sources who trusted her, the pattern analysis that finally revealed the target's location. She'd talk about the team that executed the mission and the follow-on operations that dismantled the network. But she'd also remember that moment in the briefing room, standing at the front of a skeptical audience, defending her analysis while knowing that lives hung on whether she was right. She'd remember Price's steady support and Hawthorne's call and the way the room shifted when a two-star general asked for her assessment by name. Because sometimes the valor wasn't in the operation itself. Sometimes it was in the quiet courage of standing by your judgment when everyone questioned it. Sometimes it was in doing excellent work day after day until excellence became impossible to deny. She'd learned that authority isn't given, it's earned, not through rank or time in service or the right credentials, but through consistent competence, patient expertise, and the courage to own your assessments when it matters most. And she'd learned that the people who matter, the ones who understand what real expertise looks like, don't wait for permission to recognize it. They call your name directly because they know that the best answers come from the people who've done the work. The briefing room where they'd questioned her authority was long behind her now. But the lesson remained: respect isn't demanded or expected. It's built, one operation at a time, one assessment at a time, until the work speaks so loudly that no one needs to ask if you know what you're doing. They already know. And when the next crisis comes, when lives hang on intelligence that must be right, they won't call the person with the most time in service or the highest rank. They'll call the person who knows the ground truth, who built the networks, who has the courage to stand by their judgment. They'll call you directly, because that's what earned authority looks like. Not loud, not demanding recognition, just present, competent, and absolutely essential when the moment demands it.